if you build momentum and say, look, this project was really successful, they're doing it, the client loved it, great, we'll sell that first. And then you get the kind of phone call from someone saying, you're really crap at change management. Like, I want it. Why don't I have it? And as soon as you have that type of message, that's pull demand. And you could be like, when can I train you people? Which project should we put it in?
This series of episodes was recorded live at Digital Construction Week 2025 at the Excel in London. I got the privilege of interviewing some amazing people that are shaping the future of the built environment through the technology that organizations are developing and delivering now and for the future. Although this podcast was worth the entry fee alone, let's admit it, now is the time to register your interest for next year's Digital Construction Week 2026. But if, like me, you can't wait until next year, check out Digital Construction North on the 19th of November. The links to both events, as always, are in the show notes. But just before we go live with this week's episode, here's a brief intro to the topic we cover and today's guest. The way organizations manage knowledge, structure delivery, and learn from experience is rapidly changing within the built environment. As projects become more complex and teams more dispersed, traditional approaches to workflows, documentation, and process management are no longer enough. Success increasingly depends on how well teams can capture, share, and evolve their ways of working in real time. At the center of this shift is a growing demand for tools that are not just digital, but dynamic. Tools that support both consistency and adaptability. Smarter systems, clearer playbooks, and more human-centric designs that can empower teams to work more effectively, learn faster, and deliver with greater confidence in a fast-changing world. So let's chat to someone who is leading this charge. Pip Morpeth is the CEO of MethodGrid and a leading voice in transforming how complex projects are delivered across infrastructure, construction, and professional services. With over 20 years of experience, he helps organizations embed clarity, consistency, and innovation into their ways of working through structured playbooks that integrate knowledge, process, and delivery. Pip's work combines deep expertise in human psychology, leadership, and change, focusing on what truly drives team performance and sustained transformation. He is a passionate advocate for helping clients move beyond AI as just nice-to-have features, supporting teams to scale AI in practical, human-centered ways. Pip, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you on. So for the listeners, it's a live recording. It's important to hear you, how you introduce yourself and what you're doing at Digital Construction Week. So let's start there.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Pip Morpeth. I'm the CEO for MethodGrid. It's our second time at Digital Construction Week.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Right. Let's get into what you do as an organization and really get into the nitty gritty, I think.
Yeah, sure.
This is like straight off the bat, like, we've done the intro, found out who you are, boom, this is your bread and butter now. So how do you transform static procedures into dynamic, interactive playbooks?
Sounds like a bit of a loaded question. So if I talk about where MethodGrid comes
please,
from,
yeah.
So probably a whiteboard 2016.
Okay.
We took that whiteboard concept round to different consulting organizations, and it was mainly sort of addressing the challenge, which was, how do I get consultants, teams to be more consistent in how they deliver projects or how they deliver the services that we provide as an organization. So there's kind of three sort of simple ethoses that we kind of follow at MethodGrid, which is, we want the way of working to be like clearly articulated, like universally understood, and then consistently followed.
Okay.
What we find in most organizations is there isn't really clarity on how we should do things, kind of make it up as we go along, or it's kind of, we're constantly reinventing the wheel. It's not understood across all the different functions that are involved in delivery. We'll find, project management understand it, design management, sustainability, health and safety. They all have different ways of working, and it's all held in different locations. And it's like, well, as we try and bring it together, it's confusing.
Yeah, even in their own organization, there can be silos, let alone within the wider sphere.
And they normally find it that it's their clients, like especially the consulting organizations.
Yeah,
it's the clients that tell them first. It's kind of like, look, when we buy project management and we buy cost management, it's like I'm buying off two separate organizations, and it's like we only, it doesn't really join up, and you're the same company. And then there's the big challenge, which is just, I want it to be consistently followed. I want evidence. I want compliance.
Okay.
I want to ensure that what we've sold or how we deliver like best practice. I want every client to benefit from our kind of collective expertise.
Yeah.
And that's the hallmark of what we built Method Grid to basically deliver on that outcome for clients.
So what's the impact then on team engagement, project outcomes? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So the main concept of Method Grid is we want to provide clarity in a playbook. So it maps out the kind of stages, the gates, and then all the deliverables and activities that are required, but that are required across all the different functions that need to be involved in delivering the project. The smart thing that we learned, which I think has helped teams, is so we get a lot of feedback from clients, and the core challenge is, look, we are great at telling people what they need to do.
Yeah.
You need to do this, you need to do that, and use that. What we really fail in doing is how you do it. This is how you do it. Here's the training, here's the education, here's a video explainer, here's who to speak to if you're really lost, here's some best practice examples. And really through Method Grid, when you navigate with the playbook, it opens it up, it says, look, here's what we want you to do. And then how you do it is side by side.
Right.
And then teams can chat, interact, and then start to evidence that, I've done this, I've attached the evidence, we're moving forward. And in terms of collaboration, rather than it just be held in people's heads, like that kind of memory where everything is, it's kind of like, it's just trying to visualize it to kind of reduce the cognitive load on the human and say, look, it's all there, that's what you need to do, and just grounds people really in delivery. I think the main outcome is obviously repeatability and productivity. So we don't reinvent the wheel every time. We have a defined way of working.
Mm-hmm.
We can tailor it and customize it, but essentially, rather than starting from scratch every time, I have a playbook, maybe it's a Reba one, and it's like, okay, they're the stages, what are we doing? And we can adjust it and tailor it for the work that we're doing. So it's repeatability, consistency, but then also just making sure teams aren't like lost at sea. They have got the information they need when they need it, rather than, I can't find it. Do you know what? I did something similar in my last company. Why don't we just do it that way? And that way might not be your way of working that you want to try and change and be consistent in.
But then that brings confusion and a whole host of other things into play. If people are using different methods for the same thing and the same, they're getting to the same outcome, but there's probably more efficient ways of doing it.
Yeah, there's also the real risk, and a lot of, you'll have experienced it in delivery.
Yeah.
If you haven't really got good structured processes, controls, governance, there's nothing to stop someone just coming in elbows out and be like, we're not doing it that way, we're doing it my way. And right there in that instance, you've just got rid of all your kind of best practice, and you're down to a lone wolf, single hero to try and hero it over the line. The challenge with that, heroes normally become villains very quickly. And it's kind of, you really want to try and demonstrate that you have genuine IP and expertise in how you deliver services. Also, you want to be able to build employee confidence in that. Also, your client confidence. Clients want confidence that you bring more to the table than just like the lone wolf that can come in and go, oh, we'll do it my way. So
interesting. I had like a kind of an analogy going through my head while you were talking. And on a previous episode, we were talking about roles that no longer exist in various guises, and then roles that we don't know are going to exist in the future. And one of them was a pin setter, which if you go bowling, they'd stand there and set the pins every time. And imagine that's the kind of thing. Someone keeps bowling a ball down, knocking all these pins, and someone's got to go, oh, gotta build them back up again.
Yeah.
Got to build it. And that's kind of what you're negating is knocking them down and building them up. Well, it's already pre-programmed in a way.
Yeah. I think when I worked at Capita, I remember we had a program director and we were doing a client onboarding. And he was like, we haven't written it down. I'm like, doing it from scratch, yet we onboard like loads of clients, yet nothing is written down. And when I kind of looked at, like, there was no process, no written down. So he was trying to work it out. What do HR do? What do we have to do? And it's like, I'm just literally making it up whilst I'm trying to deliver it. What I noticed was the most important thing I noticed in that moment wasn't obviously his frustration. It was the anger, but it wasn't anger kind of his own frustration. No, it was his anger against the brand, the company.
Yeah,
and that's what it's actually, if you don't put stuff in place and you don't have them, you do run the risk that actually a kind of culture it will impact the kind of culture of your organization and the value that you give to employees. Like, oh, what do you bring to help me do the job? Or is it just literally, delivery is stressful? And what are you trying to do as a company to try and help alleviate that stress? And if you're trying to deliver projects and then trying to create the way of doing it at the same time, well, that's another challenge you really shouldn't have to live with.
I really like that because it takes not the blame, but the pressure off any individual or any department that you're doing it wrong or you need to focus on this or whatever. And it's like, no, we focus on the brand and how the company's coming across, which is massively important.
And I think one of the things we learned as well with Method Grid was there isn't really one way, like, and a lot of clients, with a static, like you have it in SharePoint or like, oh, we got this kind of static methodology. And a lot of the feedback we get is like, oh, it just sits on the shelf, gathers dust. What we've learned is actually projects are dynamic. And whilst I might benefit from having like a framework and a methodology I can follow, every project is going to want to look at it and go, do you know what? Whilst it says I should do this here, actually I need to move it around and the client needs me to do this over here. And the real challenge, if your kind of knowledge process cannot be dynamic and be adjusted and right-sized at that level, you'll get the excuse that, oh, I can't use the method because I can't bend it. I can't shape it. It's just static. It just sits there. It doesn't add value to me. That's the real thing where we learned was, okay, clone playbooks, and that clone then becomes tailorable and the project team can own it. And it's their way of solutionizing how they best solve the problem. But it's transparent. And I think that's the key bit is some people get a bit nervous about, they can change the methodology. I'm like, too right, they can. But rather than it just be hidden in a document that no one's like, and you've got to communicate it to the team, it's just making it transparent to audit and assurance to the client. And then also the playbook provides that kind of transparency to the team. That's how I think we're doing it. And we'll adapt it and right size it as we go through the life cycle.
Yeah. So I suppose you must have at some point met some resistance when you've been trying to implement these things from various departments, mentioning no department specifically, but from various departments, even individuals in a way. How do you overcome that and make sure that, or is that down to the organization to do itself? How do you overcome that or make sure that everybody is on board or on track, really?
Yeah, I think you have to be sort of open and assess the culture of the organization.
Yeah.
Like some organizations, they'll be really creative, and they're known for it. And if you go over to them and say, oh, I'm going to make it really rigid and, you're going to need to tick this off and that is automatically going to sort of, that culture is going to, it's going to kick it out. Whereas others are like, you speak to some organizations and no, actually, we want to be really compliant. It's what we're built on. It's what our clients trust us. And actually, that for them, it's easy to position the use of the playbook.
Yeah.
However you position it, you're always kind of positioning it so that it kind of fits culturally with what we want to achieve. There are some psychology issues you have to address with introducing any kind of platform into a business. I think what we've learned is make sure that they feel like it's their solution. So we white label the platform so it looks like RLB's platform. It looks like Mesa's platform. It's their identity.
Yeah.
Involve them in the playbook, like the construction. It's their methodology. It's their process. So they feel like they've built it, and it represents how they work. Then when you come to do adoption and change, before you think about like mass marketing and going, by the way, everyone needs to use a playbook from this day. What we've learned that's really effective is you will need to pilot it and you'll need to get early adoption on a few projects.
Right.
And when we do this, we don't say, look, don't pick the project, pick the individual. So find individuals that are really good at accepting change. You look across if you look in your own team or in your own organization, there's probably about 10-15% of that population that are just really good, don't need much, you just say, look, I want you to try this, and they just give it a go. They're kind of that mentality. Whereas others are kind of, oh, do you know what? I kind of need to see it in my company working before I'm going to anchor to it. And what we've learned is unless you build that momentum first, so you've got a couple of early adopter projects, you've said, look, it worked really well. In some cases, you can be a little bit naughty and say, look, what you're trying to generate is pull demand, not push. So if I said, oh, I'm gonna have to train, I'm gonna have to train all your employees on how to use the playbook. They need to come to all these courses. A lot of the responses, I've got utilization targets to hit. No,
yeah.
But if you build momentum and say, look, this project was really successful. They're doing it. The client loved it. Great. We'll sell that first. And then you'll get the kind of phone call from someone saying, you're really crap at change management. Like, I want it. Why don't I have it? And as soon as you have that type of message, that's kind of pull demand. And you could be like, fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hands up. When can I train it? When can I train your people? Which project should we put it in? So there's that balance really that you're trying to build momentum first. Once you've got momentum, then you can use it, and then you can do the more wider adoption, broader comms and change and deployment. It's very difficult to, I've argued it before with a few, adoption is a percentage game. You'll never get to 100%.
Yeah.
So what you have to look at is what techniques will influence me to get it up to 60, up to 70, up to 80. And it's kind of working through that. Once you've got the critical mass, it no longer becomes an option because everyone uses it. And if you don't use it, it's kind of like, well, you're probably not going to survive long in the business because it's ingrained in how people are being. But yeah, you're dealing with humans, which are tricky creatures sometimes. Yeah.
Is there a sweet spot in terms of size of organization or number of individuals or departments that?
So it doesn't matter how big you are, or like if you're like a global organization, you've got to break it down and work it through and say, well, look, how do I influence that community? How do I influence that community? If I just treat you like a generic individual, I'm gonna really struggle. In some cases, we've introduced playbooks to certain functions first, got them happy with it, and then we've gone and come and tell us your problem. Okay, let's try and prototype it and work it through. We're still in the same company, but we're just still treating them like, well, what's your challenge? What's your problem? How would the playbook help you solve that? Rather than saying, well, the company selected method grid and the playbooks as the option. Right, you just need to adopt it. It's always trying to take a kind of sales approach, which is, look, what's your problem? Okay, I think I could prototype that. That would look like that. Would that work for you? Yeah, that would be great. Or no, we need this and that and change it. But that's at an individual level. And if you, as long as you keep that mentality that you're always selling, you tend to have a better outcome. And that's really what you have to try and do, especially introducing new technology. Some of our clients know it as you're going to be a method grid salesman for quite a long time because you're going to sell it to your team.
Okay.
Then you need to sell it to this team, and then you need to sell it to this team, and you're going to have to do that. We'll support you, but you're going to feel like a salesman.
Yeah. It's almost building that personal relationship with an organization, because it's not just a fit and forget one time. There you go. See you later.
Yeah. I mean, they're all, you always look at the structure of an organization, and they're all kind of got their own managing director. They've all got their own kind of sort of management structure. I'm like, well, they're separate businesses really. And so you look at the organization, there isn't one of them. There's like that business, there's that business and that business.
Yeah.
They have separate cultures, some of them.
Yeah.
Have separate leadership teams. So we just got to think about how we help them rather than just thinking just because you've sold it in that everyone's going to take it up. It's how do we best help all the different functions? And then it gets so noisy that somebody at some point will go, oh, you're creating so much noise. Why don't we try and consolidate this and make it more consistent?
Okay, so you've done the implementation bit. Let's just move it forward a little bit. I'm talking in general there. You know, like we said, it's not just one thing and away you go. What can we gauge from lessons learned along the way and make sure that's effectively captured and integrated into future projects?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've done a lot of work on lessons learned, mainly because about maybe a couple of years ago, we had a staff summit and we were talking about the theatre of lessons learned.
Okay.
And it was like, you look at the start, you look at them at the end. It's a bit of a theatre, really. It doesn't really add much value to the process. This is what I love about Method Grid is we talked about the problem and we give devs R&D time. We don't give them constraints. And one of our devs who's expert in AI, he took it away and built something in R&D. 3 months later, came back and said, look, you told me that lessons kind of just evaporate, or it's not about lessons learned. It's just we can't actually find them. You can't actually present them to people at the point of need. And what he built was, and he put it into staging that we use for one of our environments for doing code release. I was just, look, we've done this type of change before and this thing went wrong. I think we did a release and we should have tested it in pre-prod before we made the release.
Yeah.
And what the system had done is it recognized, based on the playbook, it had recognized that it was a similar type of change. And it had prompted a message that said, by the way, I think you're doing this. Would you like me to change the test plans to include that extra test or include that extra step? And he showed us this. And we were like, well, that's probably one of the best things we've ever seen. And it was because what we realized at that point was, it was the application of machine learning, behavior detection, but actually finding lessons at the point when they're relevant, not just I've looked at the start and then I've written them down at the end. It was what things. Some clients have got massive lesson learned databases, like 5,000, 10,000 records. It's just lost. We can't expect a human to go through. Oh, I think that was relevant to me. And what we thought, well, actually, with AI and machine learning, actually, it becomes a lot easier to push lessons that have contextual relevance at the point of need. And that's where we sort of see a really good use case for machine learning and AI for lessons learned.
Okay. So just sticking on the machine learning and more broadly AI, because that seems to be what we're calling it these days, regardless of what the context is. How do you see that helping Method Grid in the future? I know you've mentioned that part, but is there anything else going forward that you think this could be or is going to be?
It's relevant because we've done when you run a platform, I think you kind of have to keep an eye on the kind of strategic horizon. I used to think that horizon would be like 3 to 4. It's now sort of definitely 2 to 3. We were doing a bit of reading. There's a paper out, AI 2027, and it kind of talks about the evolution of AI. And I said, look, guys, we need to think about what's going to happen with AI, and then how do you respond as a platform? So we did a bit of thinking, and I think where we are right now, I think a lot of clients access AI provided by the platforms they buy.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of platforms will, just like we do, MethodGrid is connected to a Microsoft Azure hosted OpenAI, and it allows you to build your processes, your playbook, and it kind of uses AI to help you with purpose, objectives, all of that, and it builds the content. But essentially, in that model, what really is, it's AI as a feature. And a lot of platforms we've got a feature for this and a feature for that, and it's like, it's helping you use the platform better. And I think the next kind of evolution, or the kind of next wave, which I think we're seeing now, is, well, AI within the platform is now connected to more data, and it may start to be more intelligent. But essentially, AI is bound by the platform.
Yeah.
So it only has access to data in the platform. What we did a talk with our clients recently just to talk where we think it's going to go. And if you imagine, if you think of AI as a feature, we think it's going to mold to be, or kind of evolve to be, AI as a role. And rather than, I don't really as a client want MethodGrid, and I've got Risk Connect, and I've got Procore. You're all connected to different language models. I've got no control over that. So I think one of the quick changes we'll see is, I think platforms will have to offer clients language model independence, which will be, I don't want your platform connected to your language model. I want it connected to mine, because I want to make sure that we're
for sure. Yeah.
And I think the same will come true of agents. And I think what clients will start to build is, like, we're doing a bit of work at the moment trying to define the capital project delivery agent. But we're thinking of it from the client's perspective. We're like, oh, well, it's going to need to talk to MethodGrid to help do the process. It's probably going to need to talk to Procore. It's going to need to talk to Risk Connect. I want one agent that can do that role for us, but it needs to be able to communicate with other systems and other data. And the reason I think that's going to happen is the IP and sort of how you differentiate yourself in the market. It's going to be how good you have your AI workforce configured. It's not going to be, oh, it's just a feature over here and there. It's going to be like, no, we've got like a cognitive workforce, and it is like world leading. But to do that, clients are going to be like, well, it's analyzing our data, it's our agent. It may connect to other agents in different systems, but essentially I want control of that. A real simple example, like when we change our language model, like when we go from 3.5 to 4 with the OpenAI model, the whole behavior changes. And I was like, well, in that world, if you're a client and you're reliant on different platforms using different models that are changing, but you've got processes that are dependent on how they operate, you're in a whole world that you aren't in control of the dynamics and the changes within how that's influencing AI. As it takes more and more sort of up the value chain in terms of roles and making better decisions or advising, I think clients are going to be like, I think we probably need more control.
For sure.
And for us, I think that's where we'll make sure the platform doesn't create boundaries to that process. But I think really for us is helping clients on that shift from AI as a feature to more AI as a role, and helping them build and design the infrastructure that's needed to help them do that.
And I hadn't thought of it like that. If you're trying to get process driven and integrating a playbook, which will help with alignment and efficiencies and things like that. And then you've got AI on top of that, which is helping. And like you said, it's like, oh, well, I've noticed this could be done better, or you could do this more efficiently. Then that model changes, and it's like, we can do it even more efficiently. Or it might think, well, hang on, no, that's not correct. It's not more efficient. And then you're in a whole world of confusion because it's constantly changing, and you don't want the playbook to constantly change. You want it to get better.
No, I mean, we did a little experiment with AI with Network Rails Pace Playbook.
Okay.
So Pace is built as a flexible method, and based on the kind of risk classification, it changes how many stages you need, what becomes mandatory, what becomes discretionary, and that shifts based on risk. And so what we were testing with AI was, okay, if you ask us questions, AI, and we tell you what it is, could you then dynamically recommend how that playbook could be structured based on, the patterns that we're used to? I think that's going to be where work actually could become much more dynamic. Things that it says, oh, actually, by the way, there are lessons here that we've learned from other types of programs. They added this activity that solved it. Okay, do you want me to add that to the playbook? I recommend. And that's where I think we're probably slightly well positioned because we're used to making playbooks dynamic in that sense. But when we add AI into it, I think work is going to start to take that dynamic feel to it. And I think that's where I kind of call it the kind of death of static content that cannot rapidly adapt to changing environments or changing situations, insights from information from different sources. I think that's where some clients will struggle to operate in the new kind of AI way of working. In the future.
For sure. So changing all the time, a bit like us as humans. Not every day is the same for us, really. Every slightly different subtle tweaks, and it's working alongside those things. I suppose that's the key. Okay, so wrapping things up here and sticking with the future. It's the 10th anniversary of Digital Construction Week. Where are we going to be in 10 years' time then?
Probably, if you asked me a couple of years ago, I'd be, it'd be like this. But I think
it's far easier.
Yeah. So, naturally, what we've talked about, we're going to see AI take much more of a kind of role based rather than feature. We'll see it as much more kind of roles that are built,
right?
That are performing jobs and probably doing more of the complex value chain processes that we're probably not thinking about or not too confident about them doing it today. But so they'll probably do more advisory and that because they'll be able to access more information and determine it faster and make it quicker. I still think it'll be a cognitive partner. That's using the human. But then I'll also see, while we are happy with language models, I think we'll start to see much more about computer vision. I think especially in a construction environment, it'll be much more like drones, camera, and then insights driven from the machine about, health and safety. Will there just be a drone flying above us and it's looking at the site and going, oh, by the way, that's a hazard. That's
in real time.
In real time. So I think, computer vision is probably a little bit behind in terms of where language models are, but I think that's what we'll see. We'll see other types of sensory AI becoming more and more familiar with how we build and how we construct assets in the future.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. I look forward to seeing that. Pip, thank you so much for joining me today. Fascinating what you're doing. Super interesting. Absolute pleasure.
Cool. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.